Daniel Barber, my friend. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, same goes, George. I feel like it's been way too long. I was excited for this one. I've been following along what you're building, and yeah, just excited to be on the show. Excited to do something unedited, and we'll see where it goes.
All right. And for the folks out there, this is Startups Unedited. So we try to do it as unedited as possible. We are humans, we're not AIs. And what's wild is I was talking to a CEO of a AI company this morning, and he sends me a video and he's like, check this out. Is this human or AI? I was like, this looks superhuman. Like I have there was zero indication that it was AI. So this looks like AI. This could be even more human than sometimes AI than human. But anyways, thanks for being on the show. I wanted to dive into a couple of things here today for the folks out there who are learning about all sorts of topics, ranging from what it's like to be a startup founder and CEO, but also privacy is a huge issue, right? Like it's a huge topic that folks need to constantly be aware of, and it could, drastically impact their business in many ways. So I wanted to start off with kind of like the CEO perspective, right? You've been running DataGrail now for a couple years. You're not just a CEO, but you're a founder CEO, which is a little different than a CEO coming in to kind of steer the ship that once it's already been sailing and has had some success. You've built this from the ground up, which is admirable and really, really hard for everyone who knows what that's like. Was there a kind of maybe a misconception or something that got you about building a SaaS company in the privacy space that really kind of just was impactful to you, but also has really sort of impacted the way that you're leading your organization here today?
Yeah, it's a good question. For those tuning in, I'm walking, trying something different with George today.
I love
some
it.
of you might have noticed I got on a health kick last year, and so continuing that into this year. So running something a little bit different. And I can speak for an hour on that topic. But related to your question, I think what's been interesting with data privacy, and I think we saw two major trends going into this market. One in that companies are just using hundreds and hundreds of different applications. And in fact, through the SaaS proliferation and sort of decentralization of IT, it's even easier to use a new tool, right? I'd never actually logged into StreamYard before, so this is a new one even for me. I think that example just highlights the fact that, privacy has become very, very challenging, right? If you've got a business and you've got hundreds of different applications and employees logging into different applications every day, trying to understand how the business is processing personal information was very, very hard. Even in 2018, when we started the company, this was a difficult challenge, and one of the macro sort of market trends, I would say, that we were observing. And then the other one was that privacy was starting to become expected, right? And I would say GDPR obviously led the trend, right? That was the watershed moment that businesses really realized, okay, we are going to have to make some changes here in terms of how we process personal information. But these days, right, you've got 20 US states that have different forms of regulation in place, and they all are slightly nuanced and different. And so, I think those two macro trends as a backdrop set the stage for what I assumed, was going to be some fairly obvious assumptions, which was that someone in the business actually had an understanding, a grasp of the systems that were processing personal information. I think this was, I was naive, right? I think in 2019, just assuming that the CISO or the general counsel, someone had a handle on the exposure, the risk exposure of the business in this area. And it wasn't really until late 2019 when we released a product called the Live Data Map that became clear that actually there isn't anyone in the business in most companies, and the larger the business, the more challenging this gets, that has a handle on that risk and that exposure. And so I think that that's shaped a lot of the direction in terms of where we've gone from a product standpoint of understanding first that foundation of what type of systems does a business have? How do those systems process personal information? And then what risks does that actually mean for the business? And how can, privacy teams really address that risk holistically across both the known IT, so things that, have been provisioned and accepted by the IT and security organization, and then also get a glimpse or an understanding of what does the shadow IT landscape look like as well.
Mm.
And these days, right, it's all about shadow AI. And I would say most applications have some form of AI running in some capacity. And so that's made it even more challenging because we never really addressed shadow IT. Now we deal with shadow AI in, every customer conversation we're having. And, excited to help folks try to address that as it's, top of mind for any privacy, legal, or security team.
I was going to ask you about the impact of AI because I can't imagine the private information, proprietary information that's being put into ChatGPT and you name it, Claude, et cetera, and how organizations are dealing with this. I mean, this is pretty insane. Like if you think about it, and the adoption of an LLM like ChatGPT has really fueled the behavior. Like I don't even know, like myself as a consumer and as a business user of these tools, it would be really hard for me to now rip them out because they've made me so much more productive, across certain things, right? And
Right.
really
Right.
allowed me to hone in on certain tasks that maybe would have gotten less focus. So, question is like, I guess at a high level, as a SaaS company builder that now has to think about the impact that AI and this new user behavior that I'm, alluding to has made on products. Maybe we can start off with that piece, and maybe we can then touch on kind of the impact of these AI tools on privacy in general.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think there's two vectors there in terms of how has it impacted business and DataGrail, the company, and how we're thinking about our growth and adoption of AI. And then also from a product standpoint, what does that look like? How do we think AI runs within a privacy program, and where do we see the future of AI in a privacy program? I think from the first view, there's the low-hanging fruit that we saw in 2022, 2023, even 2024, to be honest, of just, focused on efficiency, right? How can we do things faster? How can we do reviews? How can we do design reviews? How can we do copy reviews? These things are fairly focused on efficiency, fairly sort of shallow use cases. But I think, as generative AI has improved and matured, now we see really like deep use cases, right? Where jobs specifically can be replaced, sets of work can be replaced, orders of magnitude of work can be completed that was never possible before. Things that just, that require significant review by a human and really couldn't be completed by a human can be completed by an AI in minutes. And that's where I would say things are very exciting. We've adopted AI. We wrote out a manifesto last year, our AI manifesto at DataGrail, of where we see opportunities within AI. We have an AI show and tell channel where employees will share different things that they're doing, things that are working, things that are not. We also showcase that work at all hands every 2 weeks because, sharing the learnings of what people are trying, what's not working also, because that's equally important. And so we've created a pretty open culture where people can share what they're working on, but work within the constraints and the construct of our responsible AI policy. So we have a policy that we developed. We actually made that externally available. So if you look on the DataGrail website, we have a template for that. So if folks are looking for to form their responsible AI policy, we have a template to be able to help folks build theirs. But that's allowed us to really like move with speed. And, in certain areas, for example, in finance and customer support, we've adopted tools that have allowed us to, achieve step function benefits. So really like removing significant manual work, making scaling actually possible. So, driving at times 3, 4, 5x the amount of work we could have completed with a human, closing our financials each month with AI agents. That's a huge step change over doing this type of work manually. And so, I'd say as an organization, we're laser focused on increasing that in 2026. And so we're about to roll out our OKRs for the next quarter. Those include AI agent adoption across the business and further adoption in many different areas. So we're not just experimenting, but embedding AI agents across the business and building kind of a center of excellence of folks that are equipped to build these, and then increasing the number of people that can build them, because frankly, not everyone is adept at using the tooling required today. I think, Claude has obviously improved significantly in the last 6 months, and there's a lot of opportunity there, but still the everyday user may not have the skills to think about work, and pun intended skills given Claude, that they're doing to be able to augment their work or replace their work with an agent. So we're thinking about that very carefully. On the product side, which I think this is where things are very exciting, I think there's a world where, and I posited this point kicking off the year, that I expect privacy teams actually spend more money financially this year for the first time ever on AI agentic workflows than they do on additional headcount in their team. And I think that's because if you look at a lot of the work within privacy, whether it's reviewing and completing privacy assessments, whether it's trying to adhere to the ongoing consent requirements on a website, so making sure that your website is honoring consent effectively, whether it's completing a data subject request and all of the steps that are associated to that, all of that work, a large portion of it, can be completed by AI at this stage. It absolutely needs human oversight. So I think, we won't be past that stage for quite some time. I think human oversight, especially given some of these decisions are of legal nature, right? They require the controller of the personal information. So I used a legal term there, meaning the company has a legal obligation to the individual that's shared their information to make decisions appropriately. And therefore, the concept of a controller performing decisions still remains important. And so that oversight isn't going away, but that doesn't mean that privacy teams are not able to remove the sort of manual work that takes hours to perform, and also remove significant amounts of risk whereby, they are relying on the organization. So privacy teams will hope to get reliable information from different application owners, right? So if you think about someone that might own Greenhouse or someone that might own Zoom, they are relying on the administrators of those applications to supply reliable information related to how that application processes personal information. And AI can just simply do that better, right? If you think about those individuals, they're not privacy experts. They have probably some understanding of how their individual application processes personal information, but AI knows that contextual information far better than an individual, and also can effectively deliver that information in a much more responsive manner, right? Privacy teams, similar to security teams, would go out and ask with questionnaires or surveys, or they would go and try to engage individuals and set up time to talk about, you're trying to buy this new application. How does it process personal information? The individual on the other end has not a lot of interest to complete that. And frankly, it's probably slowing business down. And so, if AI is able to not only complete that work faster, but frankly, reduce risk in the process, there's a significant opportunity for privacy to go through an agentic kind of change here. And I think that's where we're going to see the market mature this year, which is why I made that, strong statement starting the year that I think investment will be, for the first time, more in agentic workflows, and the AI agentic workforce than in humans themselves, which is a big change, obviously, in a market.
Yeah. We've all heard that there are CEOs out there that are mm, sort of, I don't know that it's a mandate, but they are definitely saying, I did hear about a couple mandates, but I'm not sure if that's just hearsay. But we do hear about CEOs talking about, okay, do we have to hire a human for this particular
Yep.
function, or is there a way to enable this with an agent? And
We
I
have
know
that
that's
structure at DataGrail
oh,
today, and we've had
really?
it since we released our AI manifesto. In that any backfill of an individual or any additional role that we're looking at, we have to assess, could an AI agent actually perform this work? And if it can, we won't be making the hire. We will be deploying an agent. So yeah, that already exists at DataGrail. It's existed since we deployed the manifesto around mid last year.
Wow, interesting. Are you seeing, I guess, I know you don't have to share details here, but are you seeing like a significant amount of roles being impacted by this shift to agentic? Like and is it accelerating? Is, when you first looked at it, maybe it wasn't fully, able to be, let's just call it, these XYZ roles out there weren't
Yep.
really able to be replaced by agentic solutions. Are you seeing now in the recent evaluations that more and more of these jobs, let's just call them jobs to be done, can now be taken by these agents in a meaningful way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's been quite a lot of material that's gone around in this area. I think there was an interesting talk at Davos, actually, the CEO of JP Morgan. So definitely a recording I'd encourage folks to listen to. I think, in his case, incredible run at an incredible business. They are deploying AI across that organization aggressively. And I think his point is the one that we are, maybe not as comfortable talking about. AI will replace jobs. It will. It already is. And so, really the conversation has to shift to how do we reskill people that may lose their jobs as a result of agentic workflows, because the benefit to the business financially is just too significant. And so I think that, as we look at the hires that are happening, and so, every Friday I put out privacy jobs, right? The people that are hiring in privacy, and I've been doing that now for close to a year straight, every Friday. But if you look at those roles, many of them are listing now, experience in running agentic workflows. And I think that'll increase over the course of the year, because in privacy, unlike any other function, we're seeing, real work being completed by an agent. And so, teams really need to think about, skilling their employees around using AI agents. Now, some of them might be out of the box, right? You buy a piece of software, it has an AI agent. That agent can run sets of work for the company. And then in other areas, you might be building a custom agent that is specific to a workflow of your business. And obviously Claude and Replit and others have been building software to support that type of work. So I think there's like two scenarios there of, off the shelf agentic workflows that you buy. And sometimes those make a lot of sense, right? Whereby, you could try to figure it out on your own. But, building a piece of software like HubSpot or building a piece of software like Salesforce, do we actually think that's realistic for an organization to build at this stage? Probably unlikely, right? So you buy off the shelf software because that makes a ton of sense. But then, yeah, there are agentic workflows that you don't need to buy an off the shelf piece of software. You can build, skills within Claude that match the job that you're trying to solve, the problems that you're trying to solve. And so organizations I see that, are bleeding edge in this area are trying to skill their employees to do both of those activities that I described.
Awesome. Daniel Barber, CEO, I should say co-founder and CEO. There's a distinction there, right? There's a distinction there. Co-founder and CEO of DataGrail. Thank you so much the leader in privacy. If folks wanted to maybe learn more about DataGrail or open roles at the organization, or maybe just follow your content, what are the best channels or URLs to do so?
Yeah, so obviously you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. DataGrail is the complete AI-powered data privacy platform for global brands like Databricks, FanDuel, and Restoration Hardware. Obviously you can visit our website as well, but I'd say connecting with me on LinkedIn is probably the fastest bet, and look forward to seeing those come in.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, my friend, and keep walking.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, George.